Hello everyone! Welcome back for topic 2 of week 1, which is selecting stories. Now as you start selecting stories, keep in mind that there are great places to look for stories online in our course documents folder. In that course documents folder, if you click on the folder that says stories, there are excellent resources for story selection, including the South Carolina Center for Children's Books and Literacy. I can never remember, that's SCIBL if you're here in Columbia. Or if you do not wish to leave your chair, you can look at EPIC, which has tons of choices, or the other one would be the International Children's Digital Library. So you've got great sources for selecting stories, so let's get started. Okay, so what makes a story tellable? First, you want a clearly defined theme. Then you want a well-developed plot. Keep in mind that flashbacks and subplots are kind of risky when you're doing storytelling in person. You want action and you want suspense in that plot. As far as style, you want vivid word pictures. You want good rhythm. You want realistic characterization. You want it to be faithful to the source material. Don't edit vocabulary, please. You really want to use the original vocabulary. Kids will learn better that way. They'll learn more words that way, and it'll sound more authentic. You definitely want to find something that has dramatic appeal, safe doses of drama. Fear and sadness are good things to experience in story time, and that's a safe place to do so. So definitely pick a story with a little bit of drama. And of course, you want to aim to your audience. It should be appropriate for your listener. For selecting stories for preschool through kindergarten, you might want to keep in mind it should be short and to the point. You're working with limited attention spans with younger children. You'll want stories about familiar things: animals, children, home, machines, people, toys. You're going to want to find stories that are humorous. Nonsense story poems are a good idea. Jingles, Mother Goose rhymes, finger plays. You might also want accumulative tales, the 3 series like Billy Goat's Gruff, 3 Little Pigs, or The 3 Bears. However, my illustration here on this slide, the true story of the 3 Little Pigs, might be better for slightly older children who are already familiar with the original story, and then you can riff off that original story with something like the true story of the 3 Little Pigs. Kids ages 6 to 10, you can look at animal tales, stories of children in other lands, ancient and modern fairy tales, like the Elves and the Shoemaker, all this list here on the slide. And then you can start looking at your fractured fairy tales, particularly with children in the older age bracket here, towards 9 and 10, because they have more familiarity with the classics, and then you can move to things like fractured fairy tales with Bubba the Cowboy Prince, which is a riff off of Cinderella, Sleeping Bobby pictured here, or the Stinky Cheese Man. All of those are fun for kids that are a little bit older and who have a background with the regular fairy tales. For audiences aged 11 to 14, you can start getting a little bit more complex or thematically more adult. You can do true stories, tales of adult life, hero tales, stories that teach something about personal ideals, but you don't want to go too didactic. Adventure stories are always great, always a hit. Myths and legends. I will tell you that my kids love these D'Aulaire's Book of Greek Myths and the Norse myths. Epics, biographies, historical stories, all of these are a big hit with older teens, tweens. All right, so you've selected your story. Now you have to prepare it. Please make sure you select a story that's worth the time. Please make sure you select a story that you love, because you're going to look at it for a while. So it should be something you really, really like. Make sure you really know your story well before you go to tell it. You're going to want to read it once to enjoy, reread it for the plot, reread it again. Think about the scenes and how the story progresses. You might want to put this on note cards or something. Think about the dialogue. Think about how the voices might sound. Think about the patterns that come with the dialogue. Think about the unique qualities of the characters. What is each person like? What is Goldilocks like? What is Papa Bear like? Consider the setting. You do need to do something with setting, though setting is not always the most important thing in storytelling, but it helps, particularly if you're doing a foreign land type story. And you definitely want to focus on the 4. Your story should have an introduction, body, climax, and conclusion. When you prepare your presentation, keep in mind that each storyteller is different, and how they tell the story will be also. You have to discover your way of storytelling, your best method for delivery. Don't copy someone else. For instance, somewhere in the materials of this course, I have posted something by Darian McLeod. If you've had the pleasure of seeing him, you'll know he's got a very deep voice and he's a tall African-American male. His story delivery is just awesome. He's incredible. That deep voice is hard to forget. But when I tell stories, it is just not the same. And I can't really copy him because my vocal quality and size are so different. So you need to do what works best for you and make sure that story you've chosen speaks well for you. As you prepare to present, call up the emotions as you first felt them when you first read your story. You want to get that feeling in your heart before you start telling. Breathe. I don't know about you, but I start panicking and then I take really short breaths when I'm about to go on stage for anything or present for anything. So that breathing is really important. Establish a relationship with your audience. Make eye contact. Say hello. You want to build a bridge between you and that audience. Make sure you're looking at your listeners. Make sure you look around the room. If you're not comfortable making eye contact, you can always look towards the back of the room, just above people's heads. You want to speak in a pleasant voice with enough volume. You want to make sure everyone can hear you, but you don't want to be screeching or yelling. Again, this is where breathing is really important. I know some of you have some background in drama, so you know about deep breathing and all that stuff, but it's worth going over again. Also, your gestures should be natural to you and to the story. I tend to be a mover when I'm telling stories, but a mover as far as emphasizing action that's going on in the story. I'm not much of a gesticulator, but definitely I like to walk around as I storytell. You definitely want to establish a mood for your storytelling. If you can dim the lights or put scarves over the lamps or light a candle, as the book suggests, though I can't imagine what kind of conniption my principal would have if she came in and I had candles lit in my library. It depends on your library or your situation. I like the idea of the candle, though. Make sure you dress comfortably. You're going to be moving. You're going to be in front of people. You don't want straps digging into you, or you don't want to be unable to breathe. So comfortable clothes are important. Introduce your book. Show off the cover. Show off the pictures. Depends on what kind of storytelling you're doing. If you're reading a story to a group, obviously you want to be able to share those pictures with everyone. Give a short introduction of yourself and the book. And you don't need to give definitions of strange words. Your audience will figure them out in context and by your emotions. They'll be able to figure out what unusual words are. There are so many awesome types of stories. If you need a little brush up on definitions of story types, please go to the course documents folder, and there, right at the top of that folder is something called types of stories that'll help you brush up on the definitions. Of course, we have adventure stories, history stories. A very popular history story right now is Hamilton. Anybody seen it? Thought it was great. I saw it in Chicago. Holiday stories, ballads, jokes. You want a joke? Okay. Why did the man get fired from the orange juice factory? Why, you ask? Because he couldn't concentrate. Sorry. Okay. Beast tales, legends, Bible stories, true stories, life stories, episodic stories. That's tricky unless you have a audience that you return to, I think. Myths, like the Loki myth. Fables, like the Fox and the Crow. parables, fairy tales, of course, Cinderella and all the classics, story poems, family stories, tall tales, ghost stories, all of those. You just have there's a huge variety. And as I started poking around looking at different types of stories, it's like, oh, I love that, oh, I love that. So I hope you have a great time looking at stories. Obviously, you can tell stories anywhere. This is a huge list. I suspect that many of you will be working with children, so you might still tell stories at camps. You might tell stories in a bookstore, at a storytelling festival. Many, many of you will be telling stories in schools or libraries, hospitals, anything you can think of. Of course, I left off here cocktail parties. You better hope that you're not a windbag, but I think most people like a good story. So practicing some stories to tell can help you out in a lot of different situations, but particularly if you're working in a library or a school, it makes sense. Let me reiterate, pick a story that you like to tell. And then some good advice from the revered Augusta Baker. Let the story tell itself, and if it's a good story and you have prepared it well, you do not need all the extras, the costumes, the histrionics, the high drama. Children of all ages do want to hear stories. Select well, prepare well, and then go forth, stand tall, and just tell. That's great advice. Good luck selecting stories. Let me know if you need help finding anything.